Hello and welcome. My name is Paul Shelley and welcome to TheAstroHistorian. This is a channel dedicated to exploring and explaining the lore of sci-fi and space universes and discussing their impact. Today we're going to be doing our AstroHistorian Live, where we're going to be talking about regeneration and the Regen Crisis. Hello and welcome. I need to get a haircut. How y'all doing? So for those of you who are wondering, yes, I am back to making videos. I know a lot of y'all were like, Paul disappeared off the face of the earth. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. For one, for those of you who don't know, I do a podcast called the Captain's Table, and I've been in the process of basically creating a new channel for the podcast because of how YouTube works. It's the same reason why we now have the AstroHistorian and the AstroPub separately. YouTube doesn't like when you try to do more than one thing. So I created the AstroPub and it was doing pretty well, but then I also noticed that like anytime I released anything shorter than an hour, it wouldn't do as much or do as well, or sometimes it'd be the opposite, where if I released something that was an hour, it wouldn't do so well. So I decided to split off the Captain's Table into its own videos. And as a result, I've been spending most of the time since the break really focusing on that channel, trying to get it up to speed. And as of like last month, at the end of last month, it actually got partnership. So now I don't have to, and I got everything kind of scheduled up. So now it's a little bit easier for me to kind of manage multiple channels. So today, we're doing our AstroHistorian Live. If you notice, we've released 2 different videos. There will be a third. There will be a third. I wanted to get it done this week by Wednesday. I might do it by Wednesday. I am still kind of sick. But my plan is to get it out around the release of Aegis Day to do, I'm going to be doing the history of the Idris. If I don't, then it's not the end of the world. Thank you, Rowan. Now, my plan is to do more AstroHistorian videos in general. I was planning on doing some stuff last summer, but then just things fell through. My goal is to do 2 videos a month on the AstroHistorian, which are between 20 and 40 minutes long. And over the summer, I plan on doing at least 1 video a week. And so over the summer, you will still get 2 videos, but 3 to 4 will be, or 2 videos, like 2 videos, a video a week. Even though you will be getting 2 videos, I will be putting 2 videos away into a backlog on the Patreon or for members. And I'll continue to do that cadence until the end of the summer. So come August, I'll have like 6 to more videos ready to go for when school starts up again. And when school starts up again, it usually disrupts my scheduling a little bit more because I don't have as much time. And then I can also drop more towards the end of the year when, you know, it becomes more, when people become more engaged with the content. So, and here, of course, we have Tree 0311 showing up. Star Citizen Regen. There we go. So we're going to be talking about regen and the Regen Crisis. But before we get started, we're going to read through, or before we get to the Regen Crisis, we have to know what regen is. So we're going to read through the main source for regen lore that exists today, and we'll talk a little bit about it. And then I'll go into what we know about the Regen Crisis, what it might mean for the narrative moving forward, clear up some misunderstandings, some misconceptions about regen, and then I'll take questions and answers and stuff like that. Typically, I try to keep these live streams to about 2 hours because it's Monday and I don't want to like extend too much. I'm at work with my nurse partner, but my nurse partner went home sick, crossing my fingers, dispatch us and find me work to do. Regen or cloning. So, I mean, people call it cloning. It's not cloning. It's funny because I want to say that CIG intentionally did this, but regen is quantum entanglement, but for your brain. Regen is very similar. The only media that I've ever seen that has something similar to Regen is Mickey 17, which is a video that just came out, or movie that just came out recently. It's also a book called Mickey 7, which is based off of. But the technology behind Mickey 17 is very similar to what Regen is. The reason why Regen is failing is because someone's observing it. The movie just came out. It's really good. It's by the same guy who did Snowpiercer and Parasite. This one's, it's the way this one, the best way of describing Mickey 17 is it's a live action Futurama episode. It's a comedy. It's a dark comedy, but it's very it's very scientific themes. It's got some heart to it. It's got a lot of drama. I want to go watch it in the theaters. It's really good. Spoilers, it's literally in the trailer. It's literally the premise of Mickey 17 is regen. If you know the premise, I'm not going to spoil the actual plot, but don't go in expecting like serious, thoughtful science fiction. This shit is a comedy. It's a dark comedy, but it's a comedy. Paul, did you ever say what you were waiting to see if CIG said anything about March? I did. I'll talk about it on Wednesday and Thursday again. I've talked about it a couple times. I had a couple of different people clarify, or a couple different people inside CIG confirm what I heard. So I've already talked about it in the past, but I'm not going to bring it up here because it has nothing to do with the lore. I didn't catch your thoughts on Dune. Oh, the Dune survival game. Ascendancy. I played it. It was good. It's a survival game. Like it's very similar to any like Dune survival or Dune Ark Survival Ascended or the classic Conan. I'm forgetting the name of the Conan game. But yeah, the Conan survival game. Conan Exiles, thank you. So like I said, I'm sick and I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, so my brain isn't all here. But I'm gonna try to keep it entertaining. All right. Conan Exiles, yeah, that's the name. All right, we're gonna go into the regen lore. All right, so this was released in 2022. So this was released about 3 years ago. And most people didn't pay attention to it because people don't pay attention to what lore people say on the website because they don't read. All right. We're going to go through because I'll start off with this. Video games have lore to justify to justify the gameplay. Lore is always in service of the gameplay, not the other way around. Story is different from lore, but lore and story are connected. But like lore is also in service of the story and all that kind of stuff. So you have to understand that when I say something like lore is gameplay, what I mean that is that the only reason we hear about it in terms of lore write-ups that CIG's writers do is because they talked with developers and came up with a excuse or a reason for a gameplay thing to exist. So regen is in of itself a concept that is created to service the gameplay of Star Citizen. In this case, Death of a Spaceman. If Death of a Spaceman didn't exist, regen would be removed. It would be retconned out of existence because it only exists to justify Death of a Spaceman and to explain Death of a Spaceman. So I'm going to read this and I'll kind of go over what Death of a Spaceman is. I'll kind of explain a little bit about why a lot of people don't know what Death of a Spaceman actually is or is wrong about it. And then we'll go over to the actual lore. Since the very earliest days of Star Citizen, the game always embraced the idea that there would be meaningful consequences for player death, which is funny now, commonly referred to as, quote, Death of a Spaceman, because that was the title of the design doc that was used to describe this concept, this idea. From the title of the original post on subject, the hope was to create a dangerous universe that would give real weight to choices that reward players with true sense of accomplishment if they could complete their adventure still intact. We wanted to see your avatar as something to be cared for as much as your ship, which is really ironic considering their current status of not using negative rep in game, which most of you who watch my lore content don't know that I am very opinionated about that, and I think it's a bad move, but I'll get back to it later. As discussed by Chris Roberts and Richard Tyre on the October 30th, 2020 episode of Calling All Devs, development of Star Citizen's Alpha had progressed to the point where active development of its vital gameplay loop could begin, with the active feature team leading the charge. Medical gameplay has been refined to the point where Alpha 3.15 patch is expected to bring with healing tier 0. That's how old this is, by the way. This was released around Alpha 3.15. This was before 3.17. Whew. To coincide with this brand new gameplay, narrative team has been working on some brand new lore. While we always knew that medical science would have advanced enough to bring you back from the brink of death, it was during this recent development period that it was decided that players would benefit from being able to come back even if their avatar's body was completely lost. While a lot of scenarios could have been explained away by diligent NPC emergency response teams finding injured players and bringing them back to civilization, with a game like Star Citizen, where there are a lot of cases where even the bravest ambulance pilots wouldn't be able to retrieve you. Imagine a bold explorer flying themselves directly into the sun, or some friendly outlaws firing a size 9 torpedo directly at your head. What ambulance is going to rescue you from that? While you could have declared that those instances were permadeaths and forced a player to hand off everything to their next of kin, we were worried about the punishing this would be for players, for people new to playing the game. This is why we decided that Star Citizen needs to have technology akin to cloning, where the players could bring their avatars back from death itself with a few key requirements the lore would have to address. So I have said in the past that it's not cloning. And people have said it was literally in the document that says it's cloning, but it's a misreading of people. It says it's like cloning. It's not cloning. Your avatar's memories have had to be passed on. No point in making a biological copy if they can't remember anything. The process needed to be degrade over time so that people in the universe are not immortal. How your avatar perished should be reflected in their new body. If you got blown up, we wanted to see those scars and cybernetic limbs. We also wanted characters to age, not just hop into a younger version of themselves. There should also be a copy of someone there should only be one copy of somebody at a time. No clone armies running around. So those were their restrictions when writing Regen. So right off the bat, what everyone's complaint about Regen is already addressed in those points. The funniest part is that nobody reads this document, so they don't realize that their snarky comments about, well, this doesn't explain X, Y, or Z, is literally in all of the bullet points that the writers said that they wanted to avoid. So all of their writing is built off of this idea. With all these additional elements to work in, it became clear early on that traditional ideas of our DNA scans and cloning couldn't quite meet our needs. Instead, the narrative team worked up to create our own fiction to explain the science behind these 30th century medical miracles. Please give a warm Star Citizen welcome to Regeneration. Below is a breakdown of some important terms relating to regeneration, some of which will be seen in Alpha 3.15, as well as a brief history of development of this new technology. But before you get into the new fiction, there's one more word to discuss: retcon. Since the need for regeneration is fairly commonplace and widespread in 2951, in order to match, okay, so this was actually longer than that. This is 2021. This is 4 years old. In order to match the gameplay we had set in the timeline of the lore earlier, in order to match gameplay, we had to set the timeline of the lore earlier. However, we also didn't want to invalidate too much earlier lore where characters got killed and stayed dead. This means that people of the verse have been living with regeneration a bit longer than you as players have, but not too much longer. Moving forward, all lore should hopefully correctly incorporate the history of regeneration and its effect on the lives of the people in the UEE and beyond. And of course, as with all of our systems in active development, expect the blow to keep being refined as the gameplay matures. Our hope is that this will serve as a solid foundation from which we can build from. Finally, feel free to ask questions on the Lore Ask a Dev forum on Spectrum. We'll try to answer what we can see in our upcoming quarterly Lore Masters community questions post. So, as a lot of stuff with Star Citizen lore, what you gotta kind of understand is that most of the lore of Star Citizen is basic. It is super basic. It is only enough that they need to form a foundation to have a general vibe of the universe. All of the details we get in lore is specifically to support gameplay, ships, equipment, or events in game that CIG wants to do. Hathor has been retconned a bunch over the years, basically extended its life, changed things around so that now we have Hathor in the Stanton system as its last gasp and attempt to claim a profit, because they had Hathor mining facilities already done for the now dead Theaters of War, and decided to import it into the game and use some elements with it. So, in Star Citizen lore, when was the first encounter of alien inbreeding, and how can I become one of those mongoloids in the PTU? There is no interspecies breeding in the Star Citizen universe. This is not Star Trek. All right, so let's go through the terminology. So we basically get the idea. These are the things they wanted to avoid. You can't have clone armies. You can't just jump into a younger version of yourself. You need to have cybernetics and scars and things that will cause damage over time. You also need, you're not immortal, and your memories have to be passed on. So these were the 5 bullet points they needed to address. So let's look at the terminology first. We all know imprint. The term for a complete and holistic bioscan of an individual that not only creates records of one's DNA, but also their memories, thoughts, and personalities. While these imprints can be transferred between spheres without loss, only one copy of an imprint can exist at the same time. Updating an imprint will override all previous imprints. We do know, and I don't know if they'll mention it here, but we do know that there are backup imprints, and they still don't understand how it works. But even if you erase an imprint from a sphere, if you erase a sphere, if you say, got an imprint here, you got an imprint here, and then this one's destroyed, the backup imprint still remains. Even if it's been erased, it's still in the sphere itself, and no one knows why. Regeneration. This is a term for the process upon an imprint is used to recreate the deceased source. Using the information stored in the imprint, a new body is regenerated that is near identical copy of the original, barring the effects of any echoes. Ibrahim's Sphere. The technology inside medical beds and scanners that allows them to create and store imprints. Made out of advanced materials that are alien in origin, the technology behind the spheres was made public to encourage mass production and development. It's important to note that not all spheres are created equal. Higher quality spheres are better able to preserve imprints and cause less trauma during the regeneration process. allowing for more cycles before viability failure. Traumatic response echoes, TRE. Known commonly as an echo, this term is used to describe the link between the imprint and its source. When a major traumatic event occurs, such as death or even regeneration itself, the psychological impact of it can sometimes be strong enough to permanently alter the imprint. For example, a person's legs are crushed prior to death. There's a possibility that an echo will be created that will alter the imprint so that the individual's legs are no longer functional. Echoes are the reason why patients may regenerate, bearing the scars and wounds of how they died, and why only one copy of a person can exist at a time. Regeneration itself also creates echoes, and over time, an individual's imprint will degrade and become less viable. This is also why imprints cannot be used to extend life, as the process of aging itself echoes through the imprints. However, testing has shown that the higher quality medical equipment and sphere, the less severe the impact of echoes will be. Effectively, you are giving yourself trauma. You are giving yourself post-traumatic stress disorder. You are giving yourself acute trauma, mental trauma, and your brain cannot handle the fact that you're alive. Your brain rejects the idea that you were killed and brought back. So, for whatever reason, you get your leg crushed. Your brain just cannot comprehend the fact that your leg is there, even if it is reprinted. It is metal as hell. It is super dark to think that this machine, which can basically prevent you from dying in accidents and stuff like that, also permanently traumatizes you as a result. And that's really what causes problems. It's the reason why you age. It's the reason why you have to get cybernetic limbs or scars that appear on your body, even though you've regened a new one. And then we get to the IVS, imprint viability score. This is the number used to rate the viability of an imprint to be used in regeneration. Owing to the degradation experienced from echoes, imprints eventually become so damaged they're no longer viable, and the individual will no longer be able to be regenerated. Using high-quality imprints and equipment helps prolong patients' IVS. Now, here's the thing about IVS. This is just my theory, and I'm going to explain it in the video that I'll do on this in next month. But I believe that IVS doesn't exist in the universe of Star Citizen right now. In the story of Star Citizen, it's clear based off of the reports we have about regeneration in Star Citizen that are in the universe, in the UEE, people think it's an immortality device. And it's clearly that people believe that it's an immortality device. So they may not know that IVS is a thing. That's going to get into it where I think the story of the Regeneration Crisis is the creation of the IVS system. The imprint viability score system that explains that yes, imprints do work, but there's a limit and there's a like kind of regulation for them. Phantom pain, yeah. It sounds like a lot of people would regen waking up screaming from the last moments of death if they remember it. That's the problem, Zens. A lot of people wake up from regen not remembering anything. Like with acute amnesia. Do they know if they get trauma every time they regen? In the universe right now, probably. Because they understand that you still age even though you're doing it. And that's kind of what echoes are, because of the connection itself. It gets into it a little bit later, but. So yeah, IVS is an important one that we don't have in the game yet. And I think that CIG is literally using the Regen Crisis as a way of introducing the concept of IVS to not only the players, but the universe, so that you, like, the players and the NPCs are figuring it out at the same time what IDS is. So the current Regen Crisis is the universe discovering viability, basically. Because, like, the way that the in-universe, like our like news articles are saying, it's like what we were promised it was immortal, and you can actually in-game go into hospitals and hear them talk about it. They're complaining at the front desk about their imprint stuff. There's full-on conversations that impact the lore at all of the major hospitals and even a lot of those medical clinics on space stations, but only in Stanton. So the Regen Crisis is one step towards Death of a Spaceman. Yes, but it's not going to be creating the Death of a Spaceman. It's going to be explaining the Death of a Spaceman before they introduce it. This sounds like a bad time for everyone. Welcome to the Star Citizen universe. It's a dystopia that everyone thinks is a utopia. Effectively, waking up from regen after dying would be waking up from a really bad nightmare. I suggested to the writers that possibly you would be conscious while you are being regened, as to a way of explaining why trauma echoes exist, where, like, you feel your brain, once your brain has been built enough as part of the regen process, that you will actually feel your body being reknitted. I told that to one of the writers, and the writer's like, "That's really dark, dude. No, no, we're not doing that." And I was like, "But it works with what you wrote." So no info when we may get in this game. They said specifically that they're not going to be doing Death of a Spaceman this year, or at least anytime soon, is what they said, which implies not this year. But I do think that this is that pathway to there. I don't work for CIG, by the way, just for reference. I just met a couple of the writers, and I don't talk with them often. It's just more of a, like, I've pitched to them in person at times when I was at stuff. So, all right. Then we get to regen, the term for an individual who has undergone regeneration, also slang for the process of regeneration itself. Cycle. This term references the period of time between regenerations. People will ask each other what cycle they're on and inquire how many times they've been regenerated. People are sometimes impressed with how long people's have gone without needing a regeneration. So, like, what regeneration version are you? 1, 2, 6, 10, whatever. Gap. The term refers to the length of time between imprint being made and when someone is regenerated. The longer the gap, the more memories and experiences will be lost. Frequent imprinting is strongly encouraged. And then we get to the actual process of regen. Biocorp Regen Serum. This advanced progenitive distillate is used as a base material from which cells, tissues, and organs can be bioprinted for use in regeneration. Effectively, I've been calling it regen goo. It's effectively a goo paste which you are molded out of based off of your imprint. You're 3D printed into. Wiped. This is a term used to express when someone's IVS is low enough that they can no longer be regenerated. The term originated from references to an imprint being permanently wiped from an Ibrahim sphere. Outlaws will sometimes refer to wiping as someone as killing them in a manner that will stop them from regenerating. Also could be referred to as ghosting, which is an older term in the verse. Ghosting used to be a way you killed somebody. dead, kill, murder, etc. As regeneration is still relatively new technology, these terms still refer to stopping of life functions, regardless of whether the individual is to be regenerated or not. So if you killed someone, they can still be regenerated. But if you wiped them, they can't be regenerated at all. All right, so now we got to kind of the terms. I was going to go through the history. It's actually a pretty long history. I did an entire video on this, but I'm going to go through it again. And then I'm going to also add more context to it. Famed scientist Dr. Aka Ibrahim has dedicated his career to finding a way to restore mental capacity to patients suffering from severe head injuries, brain trauma, or the ravages of degenerative diseases by obtaining detailed scans of their brain before trauma occurred. In early experiments, Dr. Ibrahim was able to repair some brain functionality, like motor functions, but any attempts to restore memories or personality were unsuccessful. While his breakthrough in brain scans helped many patients regain some functionality, if a major mental loss occurred, it seemed there was little chance of fully restoring the person. So the idea is if someone's had a traumatic brain injury and completely changed their personality or had other issues, then the process of Dr. Ibrahim's full dedication was to bring someone back to what they were before the incident, to bring them back holistically. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Tree. I'll steal it as well. I gotta use that. Oop, stealing it. Copy. There we go. Does this also have the multiple lore posts and stuff like that? Yeah, the Star Watch. Yeah, I see him now. Oh, I didn't know that old Jagger had a conversation on it, had thoughts on it. That's interesting. Miss old Jagger. Everyone miss old Jagger. Based on his reputation as a medical scan expert, in 2932, Dr. Ibrahim was invited by the UAE government to study Capture Van Duel bioengineered scanning technology. The recovered salvage was more advanced than anything that humans had developed, and even seemed beyond much of what the Vandal tech that had been previously studied. Dr. Ibrahim and his team were scarcely able to deconstruct the technology they found or even fully understand how and why the Vandal were using it. However, it wasn't until a covert naval operation in 2946, which I believe is either a reference to Squadron 42 or the sequel to Squadron 42, that new military intelligence allowed Dr. Ibrahim to unlock the full potential of the technology. It'd be neat to actually meet Ibrahim in person in one of the single-player games. Ibrahim's Sphere. The end results of years of research and the creation of an advanced xenomorphic materials inspired by the captured Vandal technology. The innovative Ibrahim Sphere allows for complete biogenetic imprints to be made of a person. Far beyond just DNA and mental scans, the imprint captures a complete version of someone, including their memories and even their personality. The most surprising thing, however, is that the imprint does not remain static after it's made. Traumatic response echoes. While the process is still not fully understood, the information recorded onto the sphere retains a connection to its source. If the source undergoes any major life experiences, such as traumatic injury or death, the imprint is permanently altered, known commonly as a traumatic response echo, or just simply echo. Attempts at using imprints while the source is still alive have all resulted in failure. A leading hypothesis currently being studied is that the unique properties of the sphere may be creating a connection similar to quantum entanglement, linking the imprint to its source across interspace. I don't know if CIG intended this or not, but this actually makes a lot of sense, Because if you use quantum entanglement, there's also something called quantum cloning, or I can't remember the name of it, but like you can't clone, even though 2 points of two things can be connected at 2 different points, no matter how far apart they are, they're effectively the same thing. You can't clone that situation, and you may be able to. People who are smarter than me may remember what this is talking about. Which effectively means that if CIG was doing research on this, then they would have already known that property existed, which is why they reference quantum entanglement here. The other thing that's important to understand is linking its imprint source across interspace. Interspace is referenced only once in lore after this, which is what jump points are. Jump points are tunnels through interspace. They're wormholes that tunnel through interspace. Effectively, interspace seems to be a different dimension that is parallel to ours, but is smaller than ours. The classic 40K warp, the Nether in Minecraft. Effectively, a smaller version of our universe that's condensed. So if you go through one point and out the other, it's a much shorter distance to get from one point to another if you tunnel through interspace into an outer space. I tried looking up interspace, and there's no references of science of interspace that I could find. There could be some. If you do, please let me know. But as far as I understand, it's completely unique to Star Citizen in terms of that name and what it does. So your TREs, or your connection through to your imprint, goes through interspace, meaning it can go at any distance. Doesn't matter how far you are away from your imprint, you will always be able to connect to an imprint. While at first the discovery of echoes left Dr. Ibrahim feeling dismayed, as he was hoped to be able to repair still living patients, a new medical path forward presented itself when the Ibrahim spheres were paired with the new groundbreaking tech developed under the military contract by Biota Corp. So it's important to understand that Project Calliope is the thing that what we call the character creator. It's actually a project in the universe as basically rapid outpatient surgery, which can radically alter the human body very quickly and very cheaply. It was designed by the military through partnership with Biota Corp, as a way of giving starmen who had been like severely wounded or disfigured, be able to basically make them whatever they want to return them to whatever state they want to, or even change their appearance. There's references of which I believe are the division agents, who basically do this like weekly, like just completely change their entire appearance, change their gender, change their height on a weekly basis to stay anonymous, which is references in the short stories about the belligerent duck, Alex Dugan and Mazulan, because the person they get their job from during that whole like Mercury Star Runner running from the for being caught, that whole story, which has its own story, is involves what I believe to be a division agent, who even Alex kind of notices is like they're like way too clean, like their skin feels too new, as it were. Astro, are all characters then by default on a fresh regen? Right now, the way it works is, yeah, you automatically have a regen connected. You've already imprinted on the sphere. All right, regeneration. In 2949, the first successful regeneration of a human occurred during rapid bioprinting technology created by Biota Corp and the imprint information stored in an Ibrahim sphere. Recognizing this breakthrough's potential, Imperator Addison authorized trillions of credits into making the technology as widely available as possible, going so far as to make the specifications for the Ibrahim sphere public, so that multiple companies could produce scanners and bioprinters needed. So it's important to know that the scanners and the printers are basically open source. They're public knowledge. Everyone knows how to make them. However, the regen gel is never referenced as being available. So you still have to buy the regen gel from Bioticorp, which is why regen is still incredibly expensive. Today, while the regeneration process remains costly, even the lowliest space station is equipped with an imprint-capable medical scanner, and billions of lives have been saved. However, as with any technological breakthrough, there's still a lot of doubts over the tech. Religious groups have protested what they see as the capture of a being's soul, and some economic groups have expressed worry that the sudden extension of life will have serious impact on society. Also, despite assurances that creating multiple imprints of the same person is technologically impossible, the fear of clone armies remains. To help with this, the government has already placed severe laws around the possibility of attempting to grow multiple versions of an individual, as such a feat would cause havoc on the notion of taxation and criminal justice. Hi, awesome. I just heard about the Regen Crisis yesterday. Well, welcome. This is all the basis for that. So, in summation, effectively, regen is a brand new technology which we don't really understand. Within the universe, they don't really understand how it works because it's been reverse engineered from Vanduul technology that we don't even know where the Vanduul got the technology in the first place. And even though we have the imprints through the Vanduul technology, we didn't get the full bioprinting technology until Bioticorp came up with Bioserum, which in my opinion likely came from Project Calliope as part of their process of fundamentally altering the human form in a very quick time. You'd need to have some sort of quick setting device, like things that can like effectively copy and mold your appearance without your body rejecting it. So it has to be tuned to your biological frequencies and stuff like that. Now, I'm going to go through a couple of these things. We do know that this is incredibly expensive. So you can't like one of the questions from Lore Maker's Guide was Lore Maker's questions was why don't we just use regen as a form of faster than light communication, because it's instantaneous. We just have one person on one side, one person imprint on one side and imprint on the other, and then you just give the person the information, you shoot them, and then they regen on the other side of a wormhole instantaneously. The problem about that is your memories aren't guaranteed, A, and B, it's incredibly expensive to do this. It would be cheaper and sometimes possibly even faster and more reliable to just send the message through a jump point than to use some sort of really perverse messenger pigeon through death. We also know that through the I think it's Homecoming, name of it. Crossroads, from the Crossroads story, that Tavaran can be regen, which is another species, a client species of humanity that we conquered hundreds of years ago, and have sort of kind of brought them into human society. They still have their own culture, and they're seen as sort of like a second-class citizens in many ways. But we conquered their homeworld. A lot of complicated. The UE Marines have done this because UE Marines, probably. And the off chance you end up white, yeah. So it's possible that regen technology could also work for the Banu and the Xi'an, because we know, again, we got them from the freaking Vanduul. Now the Vanduul didn't have the bioprinting technology, so we don't know if the Vanduul were actually like regrowing warriors who died. It could be, but we don't know. I could see regen gel being the main limiter of med beds, no matter the tier. That's kind of, from a gameplay perspective, that's likely what it is, because we do know that all of the medical beds have some sort of storage capacity, and it's been my belief that they're going to, the tier of the bed will determine how many regens you can do effectively. Right now it's the distance, but having the resources, the actual regen serum, as well as things like different drugs and stuff like that you use to cure people, those will be all needed to be put in the same location. So if you have a tier 1 bed, you have a big surplus of storage for all of your medicines and regen serum. So it's a lot easier, and you also have a better sphere installed, so it's like a higher quality scanner. So in general, you have a better chance of getting multiple regens while also dealing with people. It's a hospital bed. And then tier 2 is a little bit less reliable, and tier 3 is the basic. So, you may only have one regen on a tier 3 bed, which will limit its usability. We also know that human beings have done exactly what you think we would have done. When it was announced, when this was made public, people likely thought it was the end of death. Even though it's not the end of death, and it's clear with IVS score that it's not the end of death, you still will die eventually. Humans thought this was the end of death. And so there's a famous case where an actor, kind of a washed up old actor who's kind of past their prime, got a role in a possibly revitalized role about a person who, in a biopic about a person who survived some severe Arctic conditions and nearly died. And this actor intentionally put themselves into that same situation and died multiple times, at least once, if not twice, from hypothermia as part of this sort of full immersion into the acting role. And this itself was used by the company that hired them in the first place, because eventually the production just imploded. It ran out of money, everything was bad, but on the contract, because the company hadn't paid attention to it, on the contract with the actor, the actor was to be paid a certain amount of money no matter what status the movie would actually go into. So not only were they defunct on this movie production, but they also owed this actor 30 million credits. And they didn't want to pay that 30 million credits because they didn't have the money. So they made the claim in court that actor died. And the person who signed that contract is not the same person who's alive today, because they had died and then regened. That went to court, and it was as of a couple of years ago, was currently in the court system, which is the reason why if you go to Hurston, if you go to Maria Pure of Heart, there's a ticker on one of the different screens that basically says it is the policy of Hurston Dynamics that you are the same person as you were when you signed your lifetime contract. You can't kill yourself, then get regened and get out of the Hurston Dynamics lifetime contract. It is impossible to do so because you are legally the same person. So that is a legal question which is sort of hanging into the air. There's multiple references to outlaws basically using it as I'm about to get caught by the cops. I'm going to backspace myself out of this situation so I don't have to get into problems. Let's see. I think that's about it. The rest of the stuff is kind of the general stuff. And based off of what we could see on the from the Regen Crisis stuff that's been going on, it seems like the public was led to believe that this was the end of death. That it was very expensive, but if you could get yourself an imprint, you would basically never die. So people basically emptied out their whole life savings into regen. And this year, something started to happen. The way that the lore team describes it is, it's likely this was going on for a while. Like, people were failed to regen when they should have regen. But it was like an individual, a small hiccup, 2 or 3 people at a time. But then an explosion occurred in New Austin on Terra that killed 50 people. None of them regened. All those 50 people had regen. They had imprints, and none of them regened. And currently, there's a panic because people began to connect all these other little small chances and realized there's a pattern that not everyone can regen the same way. And so that's what goes to my theory that I don't think, even though we as players know what an IVS score is, now you know, because I've just told you, I don't think the universe knows. I don't think the IVS score has been invented yet. And I think they're going to invent it as part of the Regen Crisis, as a way of showing that not everyone has the same number of lives remaining. So that way, it kind of, introduces the concept of IVS scores to players who still don't get that you don't live infinitely, that there is going to be a limit to this. And it will introduce the concept of, this is a good technology, it's expensive, but it is not flawless, to the universe, so that players and the universe are experiencing this change at the same time. And then that will lead into the death of a spaceman mechanic. So players are gradually eased into the idea, because it's been clear since this was released in 2021 that people don't stand the regen system. No matter how much you explain it, no matter how much they talk about it, people don't understand it. So instead, they're just going to use this as an excuse to do science gameplay, To the regen issue is an issue, it's the IVS. Well, it's still an issue, but it's likely that this will lead to the understanding that not everyone has infinite regen, and that regen will eventually run out. How does your theory interact with saying this is separate from Death of a Spaceman? Because I don't think this is going to end with the start of Death of a Spaceman. I think this is just explaining Death of a Spaceman to players, so that they can refer back to, remember that thing you did with the Regen Crisis that they solved? Well, this is what they discovered. And that's going to be the beginnings of Death of a Spaceman. So this is the basis upon which they can refer back to in fiction and in the game that players played. So if somebody who comes in later and goes, what's an IVS score? What's regen? Players and the CIG devs can point to videos and stuff they've done on the Regen Crisis to explain what's going on, as a way of teaching the players in game what the lore is, rather than trying to tell them out of game and then force it into their heads after the fact. IVS and better scanner quality and gap impacting IVS, as well as how many times you've regen. Exactly. I think this is going to be the process upon which that the fiction discovers that limit, starts to discover what those limitations are, and why the players are so different. The players aren't the Dragonborn. We're not the chosen ones. We're just weird. We're genetically abnormal. We're not the only people who are genetically abnormal. We just also take to IVS or to regen better than other humans. Basically, it took a mass casualty event for the universe to start figuring this out. Yes. Which also helps explain, the Nurser campaign. Because if you think of that as in fiction, they believed it was infinite. So the campaign of regen was always the plan you could literally still point to that and say the universe believed that it was the case at the time of this commercial, and the Regen Crisis is teaching the universe that's not the case. I think it's a great way of cleaning up the messes. CIG is really good at that. The writers at CIG and to an extension of the narrative folks who do narrative are really good at taking oopsie daisies that they've done in the past and weaving them into storytelling. Like Jumptown. There's a lot of examples of like stuff they screwed up on. There was one at one point. There was a legitimate bug that they literally did an in-fiction recall notice about. I think it was like the 300. There was a bug with 300, so they literally did an in-fiction recall notice about the 300 and its bug. So. There are no lore mistakes, only lore opportunities, yeah. Well, CIG has also said in the past that the IVS score will be able to be improved over time. Let me see if I can find it. Maybe in one of the videos, but they said the idea is that your IVS score, even though it's going to take a hit, there will be ways of improving your IVS score to make it go back up based off of some missions you can do with certain groups like Rayari or Bioticorp, where you can do some experimental things with them so they can, like, you go collect certain things, you bring them back, they'll run experiments, they'll give you an experimental treatment to improve your IVS score, but it'll require you money, time, and reputation and experience with them. I think Arrowhead has written some bugs into the lore stories as well. Yeah, they're called the Terminids. Ba-dum-tsh. Replacing cybernetics with high-quality bioreplacements was an example of the way to improve IVS, yeah. So, what is the Regen Crisis? It's the universe discovering the limits of regeneration, after humans have been abusing the hell out of it for about 5 years. So we know Rayari was experimenting on regen stuff in the past with the Crisis. They have been more open. Chance to try again. I wonder if they knew all along this was coming, but Risk Reward decided to ignore it for the cost, etc. The way that CIG does its writing, I could see them just keeping it ambiguous as possible, because like Rayari isn't exactly the most moral of companies. They're not awful, but you know, they're business. You walked into that fan, man. That's all I'm going to say. Bed logging makes sense to me. It would be slow, but allows for a careful player to stay alive forever. Yeah, you can see that. At least partially. Yeah, that was about an hour of discussion of it. So Rayari has the moral compass of an Amazon or a Walmart. It's important to note that Rayari itself as a company originates from several researchers who were working on the not the Walser massacre. The massacre of Garen 2. So Garen 2 was a planet which was discovered to have sentient life, sapient life, in the form of little more advanced Neolithic societies, with communications, family dynamics, farming, very, very basic, but still civilizations, like the early forms of civilization. And when humans discovered the system, the imperator at the time, which was under the last of the Mezers, Linton Mezer, basically declared that we would be gods and we would uplift this species and help to bring them into the galactic universe. But then Linton got bored after spending billions of credits into helping this program. So this program got a bunch of scientists together who were going to observe and study and decide what to do with this species on the Garanites, I guess we can call them, on Garan 2. But then Linton got bored and realized that this planet would be beautiful if they terraformed it and allowed it to be turned it into beachfront property. So he basically sold it to his best friends, his good friends and his business partners, to give them a little something for being nice to the leader. It's good to be friends with the most powerful person in the empire, kind of thing, the emperor. And so they just walked on the planet, being like, oh yeah, we can put like a golf course there, luxury resorts there, like full view of this species, which are just like freaking the fuck out. these. And the head researcher complained. Basically, like, you ruined so much research. I'm going to lodge a formal complaint. And so Linton lodged a formal response by blackbagging them and sending them to a political prison. And told everybody else if they leaked any bit of it, that Linton would kill all of them. Well, maybe not kill, but disappear them just as well. This didn't go over well with the remaining researchers, 4 of which were the founders of Rayari. It just so happens that when the terraforming technology started happening, the footage of all of this sentient species, the sapient species that the entire empire knew existed, choking to death because their air was being changed around, their atmosphere was being fundamentally rewritten around them. Possibly even footage of giant laser beams carving into the surface, destroying, homes. Was smuggled out of the research station and just ended up in the hands of a bunch of rebels who then broadcasted it all over the empire, which led to the Anti-Mezer Revolution of 2792, which overthrew the Mezers. And it's heavily implied that the founders of Rayari were the ones who did it. They did it as A, the ethical thing to do, and B, to fuck over the Mezers. So it's like, they're not evil people, but they're not altruistic. They didn't find a way of saving the species. They found a way of avenging the species. Yeah, they're morally gray. April 11th, 2792. That's when it was broadcasted out. So it happened in late March, early April, 2792. Or 2792. Why is rep being super modified to not have negative rep? It's odd for no redemption arcs at all. So what I can tell based off of what CIG has said in the video that they released, that what Will Weisbaum was talking about, I think it was Will, was that the idea of having micro rep, basically rep with every single organization that existed, was too complicated for the game. They didn't want to have so much in-depth reputation that they'd have to track all of the interactions between these different groups, and that would be too complicated and be hard. They felt that it was harder for players to follow, and they were seeing that negative rep, because once you got negative rep, it would lock you out of large sections of the game. So they didn't want to lock players out of. They didn't want players to make one mistake and then lock out of huge sections of the game, and they wanted to make the rep more like larger spheres. So instead of having individual factions, you had rep with big, gigantic, overarching factions, which each faction inside of it has small portions of that faction. For instance, the latest, I can't remember the name of the latest addition to the universe, but the mercenary group, the security group that exists for the Hathor missions. That group is set as the base level, starter level mercenary guild rep. So that is where if you want to do mercenary work, you have to start with that guild or start with that faction. And then once you earn enough reputation with the mercenary guild, you're allowed to work with other factions inside the mercenary guild. So each faction is a tier of, that faction. Foxwell Enforcement, thank you. So, Foxwell Enforcement, and I always forget the name of the other ones, but like Blackjack Security, Northrop, those groups, are going to be their own tiers of mercenary. But the mercenary guild rep is what matters, and that's what gets you unlocks you to those different tiered groups. So they wanted you to be able to have those larger connections. My guess is what they want to do is connect the wider sphere of rep into each other, so that if you work with the council, which is the sort of criminal overarching guild, then you will have negative reputation with the other guilds or other big, large sphered groups. But instead of having 17 different groups you have to track, it's only 5. So, and one working with the Mercenary Guild isn't going to give you negative rep with the Bounty Hunters Guild, which won't give you negative rep with the Transport Guild, transport guilds, the hauling guilds. So that way they didn't have to track individual reactions. So like if you pissed off Hurston, then ArcCorp, or if you pissed off Hurston but you didn't piss off ArcCorp, you could go to ArcCorp, but then you couldn't go to Hurston, that kind of thing. Personally, I don't like that, because I don't like the idea that negative rep doesn't exist. Because negative rep is supposed to give you consequences for your actions. Now, I'm hoping that what they meant was that you can still have negative rep, but in this wider sphere. So if you work with, say, the council, all of the lawful groups you will no longer have good reps with. And some of the groups themselves may have rivalries with each other, where if you work with this guild and, say the Transport Guild and the Mercenary Guild, they may not like each other in certain aspects, which can cause some rubbing the wrong way. Or like working for the Transport Guild can sometimes get you some like smuggling, maybe some less than legal stuff you have to do, which might rub you the wrong way with the UEE as its own group. But we have to see. As it stands right now, from their statement, we cannot get negative rep with any organizations, which personally I find not very fun and removes a lot of the consequences. Literally what we were just reading in the reputation, in the whole purpose of Death of Spacemen was that actions had consequences, and that those actions would follow you with your character. Removing that whole idea from reputation, which is the main source of that friction, seems counterproductive to the experience. But yeah. If what you just said is their new change, they just negated their what they said, that people could brick their accounts if they were murder hobos and wouldn't be allowed to land in point of no return. Effectively, yes. Rep without consequences is just another form of faction currency. Yes. I'm hoping, I'm hoping what they meant, because one of the things they said as response to that, what Will was specifically referring to, was getting negative rep to the point where you were unable to land at a location after making a mistake. So they didn't want you to be able to accidentally become shoot on sight with a group. Which to me seems like, well, the solution to that is make negative rep a spectrum rather than an instant off on. Because right now, positive rep is a spectrum. You have small rep, you can only do small things, and as you build up your rep, you can unlock more actions. Negative rep should be the same, only in reverse. If you just get negative rep a little bit, they don't like you and your prices go up if you want to interact with them. And the more negative rep you become, the more and more consequences pile up until you reach the point of no return where they're just like, we don't like you anymore. And of course, rep always drifts towards neutral, so your negative rep would eventually, if you waited long enough, they would forget the bad stuff you did, and you would eventually reach back to neutrality. Could this be another placeholder system? I doubt it's a placeholder system. CIG seems to be so focused on 1.0. I think this is a indication of their vision towards 1.0 and what 1.0 is going to be. They've kind of changed the direction of that. What I'd like to ask CIG is if we don't have negative reputation anymore, what's to prevent bad actors from being bad actors? Because prison isn't the answer. And getting good isn't the answer either, because what'll happen is that people will just use the fact that there's no consequences to just attack players for the hell of it because they're bored. Which was the whole point, at least to my understanding, of the reputation system in the first place. Was it was supposed to naturally filter out people who were being too much of a dick. And I know that CIG, it seems like CIG was also, it seems like this system is also designed around not penalizing players for, like, if I'm backing the headhunters and somebody else is backing the CDF, I shouldn't be penalized for working with my friend who's in the CDF, and they shouldn't be penalized for working with me because I'm working with the headhunters. We should still be able to play together, which in my opinion is like, no, that's the whole point of the game. Like, just don't do that. It's like, well, what if my friend is, then don't play with you. You obviously aren't playing with the right friend. Go get another account. Like, there's nothing wrong with you getting another account to play with your friend. It's what everyone's going to do anyways. You mean like intentionally camping above Area 18 so long it had to have an armistice zone increase weeks ago? One of the things that I think is the biggest weak point for CIG in general is their misunderstanding of player psychology. And that ties into the lore and sort of the storytelling they want to do. Is that it feels like CIG both wants to have a sandbox game where players make their own experiences and a highly customized, dedicated storytelling. But you don't have both of those things at once. You can do a hybrid of those two, but it's going to sacrifice some of the freedom of the sandbox and some of the highly detailed, like curated stories of a, that kind of sort of experience. The CIG seems to want to do both of them at the same time. And that doesn't work. That's going to cause some clash and some narrative friction because the people who are over here just to build sandcastles and knock down sandcastles are going to interact with the people who just want to go fight the Vandul, and they're going to intentionally mess up those people, mess up their experiences because they're bored. They assume people are good on the inside. No, I just don't think they think about it. Yeah, and then of course, if you want to actually deal with people who are being super toxic, CIG is super reticent to actually ban anybody because they kind of are cowards because they're afraid that if they start banning people, then other people get mad and they won't spend as much money on their game. So they want to obviously pay the bills and pay the people who are working for them. So they want to keep that going. So they don't want to hit that ban hammer hard enough, But they also don't want to give us tools to be able to report bad people, which probably comes from that whole we don't want to have to actually do stuff. Because if we actually have to do stuff, then it might cost us money or legal actions. I disagree. They do, and their response is the players can fix it, which legally they're off on the hook. Like I'm not married to the idea that this has to have some sort of deep lore implications. There's plenty of games that do really good lore background. Look at the Soulsborne games that have lots of narrative-rich flavor in stories that are being told and background lore that's never like shoved in your face. You have to figure it out on your own. And it doesn't affect the gameplay. Like the games can still exist as a funky, weird game. You can still set up your characters however you want. There's nothing that's preventing you from doing those things. And you can have a universe that people are fascinated by. Elder Scrolls, another great example. It's probably the biggest example, in my opinion, of a open sandbox game that that has a lot of lore underpinnings, that allows players a lot of freedom. There are some disadvantages of those things, but it's not impossible. I just don't like the fact that CIG is trying to do both at once. They're trying to make Rust and they're trying to make WoW. And they're trying to go Keith, and it's not going to work. I'm not going to go into too much of that because that's more of the Astropub discussion than the AstroHistorian. This is mostly discussing about lore. So I know people are frustrated, and the reputation system is connected to the lore and is going to connect to the gameplay as well. Because again, the whole concept of the lore, in my opinion, and my experience, at least the idea, was that it was going to be expressed through factions. And your experience with a faction would affect what the game is going to tell you. Faction leaders, faction mission givers, so you can kind of know a little bit more about the universe through these factions, because you may just go, I want to be a bounty hunter, this is a bounty hunting group, I'm going to go join them because I want to make money. But then you get connected to characters, you understand, maybe they talk about the advocacy and regen and many of the other sort of issues around criminality and law enforcement in the UEE, about how you're a contractor, but there's not a lot of there's private security, but there's not a lot of like police and public security that exist because most of them are off in other locations trying to deal with a Vandal, or they just don't have enough money. So there's a lot of world building and storytelling you can do in that situation. But if it's just faction rep, it becomes, I just need a way of grinding this out so I can get this item and check it off the list, and then I can do whatever I want. There's no consequences to his actions, which I like Elder Scrolls, but I don't like that approach where you can be the leader of the Thieves Guild, the head of the Mages Guild and the Fighters Guild, and like all at the same time. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Have you discussed how everyone setting their spawn to C8Rs, nurses, and medpins is the real reason we have Regen Crisis yet? No, that's not the real reason. As I said before, it's likely CIG's way of introducing the IVS. Ashbrom, since Squad 42 is out in 2026, will there be a chance of the Odin system, the PU, by 2027? Since in lore, blown up planet, mine for days. Possibly, but I wouldn't be able to judge that. Because I think CIG wants to have 1.0 breathe a little bit. So we'll probably, once 1.0 comes out, they'll probably have at least, I would say 6 months to a year before they kind of create new systems and release them, because they want players to experience the universe that they created. The reason why they don't have any UEE responses and scanning is because of limitations. That's just, they don't even have all of the missions from pre 4.0 in the game again. So they need to have the AI be better. They need to have them work with the current meshing systems. That is literally just an alpha issue. Okay, lore question. Why can we walk around cities in full kit ready for war? That's probably because of the current limitations in tech. CIG has said in the past that the goal is to have those, you know, those like those big scanning devices you walk through when you go through any spaceport. Those are supposed to be weapon scanners. So you're supposed to have to take your weapons off and store them in those lockers that you see on the other side of those scanners, and your armor in the future. Right now, it just doesn't exist because there's no viable way to make those work. That's probably one of the first things they'll do when they introduce bounty hunting, though. I think CIG realized that Death of Spacemen is a bit hardcore. We need a way of gradient between infinite respawn and oopsie you're dead and people rage quit. David Wiley, I'm sure you just showed up, so you didn't hear the explanation, but that's literally what the IVS score is. Most people don't realize that the IVS score is an in-fiction way of describing why you die eventually, but having infinite lives. But it's such an easy thing to tweak. CIG can give as much or as little as they want in your IVS score. They can set the IVS score so that you have literally 1,000 lives, or they can set it that you have 4. It's entirely tweakable because that line will determine how many lives you have left. And they want it so that it's meaningful, that you don't just die instantly and lose everything. But they also don't want to make it so long that it doesn't matter. So there's going to be somewhere between way too much and way too little, where you have to regen and get a cybernetic limb, or have to make those decisions along the way. And I said before, the idea that that CIG is getting rid of Death of a Spaceman, they wouldn't be doubling and tripling down on the Regen Crisis. Regen would have been retconned away by this point if they were getting rid of Death of a Spaceman. Regen is Death of a Spaceman. So there's no way that they're getting rid of Death of a Spaceman as long as they're continuing to not just work on it, but add it into the game in terms of narratively. I don't know, you know, this is the wrong avenue to talk about when questions for gameplay. Lore question: Given CIG's recent shift towards spineless cowardice, how do you think the lack of negative rep will influence the lore? We've already got over that, Iris, but like, I don't know how that's gonna work. Wait, our weapons is the reason why the cities are running from us? Probably. Is there any planet water? Yeah, there's a couple of different planets that are just water. Helios is one of the worlds. The Banu home world is a water world with a bunch of archipelagos. So, Bacchus. There's a lot of planets that are just water planets. They're just not anywhere near release, so. Toe Hill's mostly water, yeah. The other thing that people know even less about is that the medical and medical services in Star Citizen are supposed to be robust. The regen lore supports all of this. Your character is meant like a ship. Big boom, big die, rare, disabled, downed, and repaired, rescued being the norm. Yeah, there'll eventually be, like, just from a gameplay perspective, there'll eventually be a system in place for you to be rescued, like Trauma Team. There'll be a Star Citizen version of Trauma Team that players can call on. That'll be expensive, but will rescue you and will be cheaper to do than to regen. Oh, it's Star Citizen? That's what we're talking about today. Yes, Blinky. I heard there's a new bug, but originally there's a weapon drawn fear code on AI. Oh. Got about another 20 or so minutes. If you all want to ask any questions about the videos I just released on the Banu or any of the ships of the UE Navy. Now, I did the ships of the UE Navy pretty quickly. I had to make some snap judgments, and people pointed out a couple of things that I missed, like, for instance, that the Saber does show up in the Squadron 42 trailer. I didn't realize it was bad. It was still in the trailer or in the cutscene, because I'd seen it in previous cutscenes, but then I didn't see it in the most recent ones. And then people pointed out there's actually a Saber in Squadron 42 that's flying around. So I will have to cover the lore of the Saber in the miscellaneous ships. And Up until recently, I had never seen any references that the A2 was used by the UE Navy. And somebody, one of the commenters on the video said, what do you mean that the A2 isn't used by the Navy? It literally says it in the Galactopedia. And I checked the Galactopedia, and lo and behold, it's actually been added that it's part of the UE Navy. So I'm going to have to go back and add that as well. I'm not going to add it to the fighters, bombers. I'm just going to add it to the miscellaneous ships. And I'm going to argue that it's miscellaneous ships because the A2 is weird. Same with the Saber. They're sort of in a weird position because they're both part of the UE Navy and not part of the UE Navy. And the A2 specifically is a drop ship that is also a bomber. So it's kind of a multi-crew ship. In fact, I was actually thinking about the Vanguard not being added to that video either. I was going to add that to the miscellaneous ships, but I was like, yeah, it's more of a fighter than anything else. So, are the Banu secretly plotting to take over the UEE? No, that would require more thought than the Banu have to think. But with it being part of Squadron 42, there is a possibility one of them in the one in the video is custom. That's the other thing I'm going to bring out is that there's no direct references that the Saber was accepted into service into the Navy. It was proposed for service, but there's never been a definitive answer anywhere that I could find that it was part of the UE. However, it's in Squad 42, and we know that Squad 42 uses custom vehicles. And that there's a lot of leeway because they're special snowflakes. They get to choose their own ships. So a Saber being chosen doesn't necessarily mean that it's part of the Navy, just that it's there. Like the Scorpius, for instance, I thought was part of the Navy. In my research, it's never referenced as part of the Navy. It's been referenced that it was approved by the Navy. Like the Navy tested it and to make it, the Navy, the CDF, so the 999th Squadron and the the Bremen Defense Force, the BDF, both of them tested the Scorpius, and some Navy pilots tested it and used it in combat. But there's no references that it's been accepted for active use by the Navy. What's with the Saber? So the Saber has got a weird role. In the lore, it was part of the next generation starfighter contest. The problem is, the next generation starfighter contest was also the contest that approved of the F-8. The next generation starfighter contest of 2935 or 2930s was the one that the F-8. And then the Saber was introduced in the next generation starfighter contest in the 2940s. And the one that was in the 2940s was specifically to counter the new heavy Vanduul fighter. And Saber is early lore, so it's like, why the fuck are you using a medium stealth fighter to fight a heavy fighter? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So, and because it was brought up for UE adoption, but because of the changes of how Aegis is changed over time, Aegis literally developed it for the Navy, offered it for the Navy, and the same day that they submitted it for the contest, they made it available for purchase. So anyone in the civilian market could purchase a Saber as well. And that's all we know. The Firebird, no idea if that's being used by the Navy. Peregrine, no idea if it's being used by the Navy. None of the Saber variants seem to have any sort of connection with the UE Navy. What are we talking about with the Banu? The Banu one. Can non-Banu lead a Suli? Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, non-Banu are part of Sulis all the time. There's nothing in the rulebook that says a human can't be an SO Suli. And if you read the story about the belligerent duck, which is Alex Dugan and Maz Hulan, Maz treats Alex as their SO Suli. So effectively, Maz doesn't use the term SO Suli, but they treat because Alex is a human and wouldn't probably understand the concept, though Alex does speak Banu. So we know that she has, and even in the story, she knows the one of the members of Maz's old old Sulis, who became when their old Suli died, she became the head of the new Suli, which kind of gathered a bunch of the older Suli members together. So she's friends with Maz, but they're not really in the same. He left, Maz left, and joined Alex. Which again, I'm using gendered pronouns because they do in CIG and like a lot of these stories, which was probably because before the whole like Banu don't have a gender thing. But I also think that a lot of the gender stuff in Banu, in gendering of Banu, probably has to do with the Banu themselves. Because the best way of describing it is Banu understand the concept of gender, they just don't have it themselves. So just like how Jerry became Jerry because everyone called them Jerry. So he's like, I'm Jerry now. Hi, I'm Jerry. Like, that's just kind of what they do. So if you refer to like maybe a Banu that has a higher pitched voice as a she, they're just like, I'm a she now. Because like they don't give a fuck. They just want to make money. They're there for a good time, not for a long time. So you can call them what the fuck you want, as long as it's not actively insulting them, they're fine. Yeah, Jerry. The first Banu we've ever met was named Jerry. His name was actually Njeri with a Njeri, N''Jeri. But because when he tried to introduce himself to humans, they didn't hear Jerry because it is a little softer. So they just heard Jerry. So they're just like, all right, you're Jerry now. So he just was like, I'm Jerry now. Hi, I'm Jerry. Call me Jerry. I'm Jerry. Oh yeah, and the Raven as well. Yeah, I forgot about the Raven. I forget the Raven. Any notable operations with the CDF and UEE as a joint task forces, if they stand out? There's a couple. I'd have to look up specifically. Broadsword is one of them. Operation Broadsword. There's been a couple of major joint operations in a couple. I'd have to go look up. There are references specifically to these joint operations working. I think one of them was in the Pharaon system. That dealt with like kind of an outlaw gang rising up. So wait, do Banu, does it mean Banu clone themselves or split to reproduce? So you still need two Banu to make a baby, but they sort of choose who's going to carry the child and who isn't. Reproduction in Banu society is not about getting married, loving someone very much, and deciding to have a family. Reproduction in Banu society is a business. You are born as a product in Banu society. You were born because two Banu needed to make some motherfucking money, and they're good at making babies. So they decided to make a birthing Suli. And maybe multiple Banus are all doing this at once. And then once you are born, you are sold to a rearing Suli who raises you and nurtures you and figures out what you're good at, teaches you everything you need to know about being a Banu. And then once you figure out what you're good at, they will sell you off to an education Suli who will then teach you how to do the job they think you're good at. Once you go to the education Suli, then you get sold to your first professional Suli. And in your first professional Suli, they take a really good, sold is the word. They're selling you. But it's more like indentured servitude, because once you are sold to your professional Suli, you're given what's called the divestment clock, which is this clock which it's like that's timed for a specific number of Banu beats, which is their own measurement of time. And when that reaches zero, it's your retirement. So basically, you can either pay off your debt early, and then you're divested from your first Suli, meaning you leave your first Suli and retire. You can start your own Suli, you can do whatever you want. Or when that clock runs out, you are able to retire from that Suli and get to a new one. So, does that mean Banus are slave to each other? Yes, but not really. It's kind of like a hybrid between a family and a business and a guild. Like once you're part of a Banu Suli, you are ride or die. Like Once you have negotiated and been brought into a Banu Suli, you are now an asset to that Suli. And anyone who fucks with you is also that Suli's problem. So if you join a Suli and your enemy is coming to kill you, that Suli will help you bury the body. They'll charge you for it, probably add some time to your divestment clock, but you're not going to be dead. How common is ship ownership in Banu culture? Oh, huge, massively. Banu own ships all the time, though a lot of ships are usually owned by Sulis rather than individuals. And in human culture, it depends on where you are. If you grew up in a core world, in a world that's very urban or very populated, there's a very small chance you have a ship. But if you grew up in places like Bremen or like Castra, you probably owned a ship because there's just not as much infrastructure. So getting from point A to point B to get to like a job, you probably need a ship. So your average person doesn't own a ship, but if you live on the frontier, you probably own like an Aurora or a Mustang. You know, your family probably owns an Aurora or a Mustang, and you use that for like commuting and such. But it's, you know, very rare for a person. So like the vast majority of people don't own ships because there's just no need to. It's only for the very specific groups of people and only if they need it for their funding. Like a colony might own a freelancer, and that's their main source of true communication and transportation for like materials and stuff like that to keep the stuff running. But like in Pyro, everyone owns a ship because there's no fucking infrastructure, and so it's the only way you can survive is a ship. The family car. Literally, there's a thing called blading, which is a thing that teenagers do in the Star Citizen universe, where they take their Aurora and they fly it into Vanduul space to attack or to attract Vanduul and try to out dogfight a Vanduul and get out. Basically play chicken with Vanduul blades, Vanduul scythes, and leave. Yeah. Teenagers be stupid, yo. Who controls the Banu divestment clock? You do. But you're giving it to you when you get your first professional Suli. So basically, when you're sold to a professional Suli, your education Suli will gift you a graduation gift, which is your divestment clock. Will Bremen be in game? Yes, it is. It is one of the systems that will be in game eventually. So what Star Citizens must look super rich to the NPCs. The way I've always put it is that Star Citizen players are sort of mid to upper class, like middle class. They're like kind of solidly middle class to upper middle class. We're sort of that middle class in the society, and we're not the only ones who are that sort of class, but we're the main bulk of the middle class of the UEE as a whole. The vast majority of people are in the lower classes and maybe at most have one ship. But just because you own a Banu merchantman or a privateer doesn't mean you're gonna compete against ArcCorp. You know, they laugh at you if they think you can beat them because they're just so huge. Like you're very tiny fish in a very big pond. We're the ones that have the drive to make a new future for ourselves. Yeah. We're the ones who have enough power to cause problems, but not enough power to be the solution to the problems. Do you have a theory of where the Banu got their tachyon weapons? Based off of lore? Yeah, I think they got it from the Krthok, who are the mortal enemies of the Xi'an. But I don't know, Banu are shady as hell, man. Like, the Banu have known about the Xi'an since 1927. We made first contact with the Banu in like 2350, 2360. So we made first contact in the middle of the 24th century. But they had known about the Xi'an for like 300 to 400 years. They didn't tell us shit. So we just sort of like, it's like, why didn't you tell us that this Xi'an existed? And it's well, most likely the Banu were like, you didn't ask. Why do we have to tell you these things? Hey, Bite-Sized Hobbit. How you doing, Bite? You doing, Hobbit? Good to see you. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Very hobby feet. How's it going? Players are citizens as well. We're not technically citizens. We can earn citizenship in game, but the fact that we can earn citizenship in game without going into the military means we already are in a higher socioeconomic class than most people in the UAE. Do the Banu have any other ship apart from the Defender and Merchantman? Probably. They just haven't put them in the game yet. Almost certainly any ship that the humans have for any like military or industrial purposes, the Banu probably have. But they likely don't have like a large capital ship fleet, because we know that the Merchantman is basically the anchor of their fleet, because they don't really have a navy. They have a militia, which is volunteer. So first time checking out this stream, loving this. Thanks for the stream. No problem, Tycho. I also stream more. I'll have more just like straight up discussions on Star Citizen, Star Citizen, information, like Star Citizen news and like goings on and gameplay stuff. I usually have those discussions on youtube.com/TheAstroPub live, or twitch.tv/TheAstroPub, which I'm going on live right here as well. I do that on Thursdays during my office hours, which is a sort of yak like this, but it's specifically around like Star Citizen stuff. So if you hear me say, I don't really want to go into that because it's not really a lore thing, that's usually what I'm talking about. I'll talk about it in other things. They don't seem to care much about history, but I'd imagine they'd see the info of the Xi'an as something they could profit off of. Probably. Can the Banu remove their face level urine stink out of the Sulian, please? The Banu don't make the Sulan. They make the Defender. Do we know if Vanduul use industrial ships or just combat? They do. They're called the Harvesters, and they're terrifying. Vanduul Harvesters are the closest thing the Vanduul have to mining and salvage vehicles. They're imagine a long tube with centipede legs that are all mechanical, and two claws that are holding a giant rolling death, like a giant roller, like a concrete roller press, like a what are they called? Steamroller. Can't remember the name of it. The stuff that you use for like flattening out road surfaces on an asphalt. But that is actually a grinder. So it sort of moves forward on these tiny little legs as it skitters forward and chews everything up that comes to it. Big Halo level, a planet glassing, but at a surface level. Oh, they still do glassing, but by glassing they nuke the planet. Like Cyrene was. Whoo! There's a reason why I like. Just this is just a general rule of thumb. If you meet a character in the Star Citizen universe who's descended from the original settlers of Cyrene in the Virgil system, don't piss them off. Ever. Do not. If you find that your contract is to find somebody and kill them, or like basically go up against a original settler from Cyrene, cancel the contract. Just turn around and walk away. It ain't worth it. Okay? These people hold grudges that are genocidal. Because when their planet was invaded by the Vanduul were responding to the UEE's use of antimatter weapons on Tiber, because the Vanduul had taken over Tiber, and the basically the UEE said, no, fuck you, you're not taking our resources, and antimatter bombed their own facilities, their own cities that had been overrun by the Vanduul to deny them resources. And so the Vanduul took that personally. And when they kicked the UEE out of Tiber, they fell back into Virgil, and the Vanduul followed after them into Virgil and decided to antimatter bomb Virgil in response, or Cyrene in response to the antimatter bombing of Tiber. So when the people who managed to escape from Cyrene, thanks mostly to the Black Crows. I can't remember what squadron number they are, but 214, I think, the 214, Squadron 214. The Black Crows basically continued to dive into the thick of it to clear out lanes to allow for transports to arrive in Cyrene and peck up refugees and escape off the planet. And when they fully pulled out, the planet was gone, devastated. There's description of a famous image in the Star Citizen universe, which is a picture of the city of Kastak burning in the distance. And there was this wooden plank which had sort of the exports and imports of Kastak, the city, which is the capital city of Cyrene. And famously, it said Kastak exports, or import. Yeah, it said exports, and scrawled in blood was death written over all of the plaque. And it's a famous anti-Vanduul propaganda piece that's been used, which sort of shows like the devastation. You know, the Kastak had been, antimatter bombed, basically. And so this is like the last surviving image of Kastak, which is where the Kastak arms took their name. They took the name as a specific fuck you to the Vanduul. And the people of Virgil took this so personally that they set about to create Virgil Ltd. And part of that creation was the creation of the Zeus system, what we know as the Titan suit, the ATLS. Now it's likely the ATLS predates the Titan suit, but it was one of the first Titan suits. The people of Cyrene, the Virgil Ltd, said, what if we turn this into a death machine? And so that's what they did. They built a fully operative combat ATLS, not the one that Wicklow has, a better one, specifically designed to kill Vanduul. And this is like generations after their people had lost. Every record of the people of Cyrene, every record shows that every single person who is descended from Cyrene has a grudge and is brought up to have a grudge against the Vanduul. They are suicidal. Like, if there are only if there is one surviving group of people who will survive the Vanduul invasion, it'll be the descendants of Cyrene, simply because they're too stubborn to die. They're dwarves? Yeah. They're like dwarves mixed with the Cadians. They're the Star Citizen equivalent of the Cadians. Like, they lost their world, but they're too mad to die. Oh, it's a lore question. If we piss off the people of Virgin Cyrene enough, will we get cool death machines and mechs? Yeah, they'll kill you. That's what they'll do. Yeah, Virgil makes the True Death system, which is used by all the advocacy in the UEE. So like, they make the lightweight armor system, but they also make the heavy stuff. So yeah, I'll regen. Depends on your IVS score. An entire human subspecies dedicated to revenge of their people. Absolutely horrifying. It is psychotic how the culture is so dedicated to revenge. The admiral who was in charge, the first admiral in charge of the Stanton system, was a descendant of Cyrene, and she kept a picture of her family's homestead that was destroyed from Cyrene that her grandparents had. She kept that picture on her desk. Whenever someone asked about it, she said, "It's long gone, destroyed and chewed up by the duel in their genocidal rage against us." She wanted to do nothing. And this wasn't sort of like an ambition thing. She wasn't like I'm going to go out and be a hero. She wanted to kill the Vanduul. Like her entire naval career was based around getting enough reputation and experience and skill to eventually be able to lead a fleet against the Vanduul so she could kill them. Her whole life was centered on murdering Vanduul. 3 generations. She had never even seen Cyrene. She'd never probably even been to Virgil. She was born on Vega, effectively. I will abandon all their contracts while wearing my Vanduul mask. Lore question, where's Bishop from? We don't know, actually. I don't think there's an answer of where he's from. My guess would be he's probably from Earth, from Sol. But, yeah. He could also be from Vega. I don't think so. He also could be from MacArthur. Well, it's not implied that his family is military. His daughter is in the military. He was in the military, so I imagine it's a family tradition. I love the people of Cyrene. I want to see more of that because it's the most interesting story of the Star Citizen universe in terms of humanity. It's just like, I'm a sucker for that sort of thing. I have Cadians for example, as my army in the 40K. But there's just something so viscerally human to have an entire culture that is dedicated to revenge. It's so sad and so relatable that like your life is built around getting revenge for something you never even knew because it made your parents sad or it made your grandparents sad. So are you thinking the Idris P might be released for Invictus? That's a different question, but I've answered it before. I still think so, yeah. I'm becoming less inclined to believe it as we get closer without any more hints from CIG. But I did hear that the rumor that Jared or Xylo said specifically that it wasn't coming was fake. It was like faked posts. Can my character be born in Pyro but from Squadron, but in Squadron 42? I think so. You can choose your origin, your planet, your system origin. In the it is part of the sign up page. So. Yeah, we can pull it up real quick.
You'll play through. 6.
I'm getting a faint.
So you can choose your combat ability, which tells you where your what it is, but you can see your homeworld. So Angeli, Van, these are both from the Croshaw system. Earth, Mars, which is from the Sol system. Terra, Jen, Hurston. So like your homeworld, it looks like you can go down. So you might be able to say you're from Cyrene, though I doubt it. I think you'll probably be able to say you're from Vega. Bagpipes? Let's just listen to bagpipes. Hold on. We'll get to the actual bagpipes section though. Here we go. Here you go with bagpipes.
Scimitar, reposition for heading 038. Copy that. Adjusting heading now. Reaper Squadron. Thanks for joining us. What's your sit rep? In position, holding now. Understood. Stand by for further orders. All flanks. Bishop wants to lose formation on our baffle so we don't clump up. Copy that.
No, we're not watching this. I just wanted to. I was showing off that like you can choose at the very beginning when you choose your application, you can choose your personal details. Or you can choose your homeworld. Now I have a feeling that your homeworld will determine some of the dialogue options in the game of where you're from, which will then revolve around little that kind of stuff. So. Like Angeli is Croshaw, Van is Croshaw, Earth is Sol, Mars is Sol, Terra is Terra, Jen is also Terra, Hurston is obviously Stanton, which means you could also probably say you're from ArtCorp, Microtech, or Crusader. My guess is you could probably also say from Castra, would be my guess. But we'll see. It's not a Pegasus. It's it's whatever the carrier version of the Bengal that they had. Technically, I think it's called Cascom is the world rather than Castra. So. What if I'm from Synth World? You can't be from Synth World because Synth World doesn't exist. You too could be the son of Stanton, but not the son of Stanton. Yes. I don't think you can choose that homeworld. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It looks like it goes down a little bit, but I imagine it's going to be UEE worlds. So probably a lot of the worlds we already know that are UEE. Obviously, Croshaw, Sol, Terra, Stanton. I really want there to be an option for Magnus, but we'll see. I want to be from Berea. Integrity is the battle cruiser, but like there's a carrier version of the Integrity class, which we don't know about what it's called. Argus is what I'm calling it right now, the Argus class. But I can't be a Nyx baby? Nope, Nyx isn't a UEE system. Any rumor on this larger than Jab ship? Nothing other than what we've seen. Am I ready for that HSP though? I am. Yeah, the Integrity, which we know is a battle cruiser, because in lore, there's an actual reference to the Integrity. Because it was part of they did a propaganda video with the Integrity to try to get people to sign up for the Navy. And we know it's a battle cruiser, and it's at the Battle of Vega 2. So we actually see the Integrity. And he even mentions the Integrity, Admiral Bishop does. So we know the Integrity is a battle cruiser, or is a cruiser, and so the ones with the big guns are cruisers, which means that the ones that look like carriers are probably something else. And the Argus seems to be the carrier type that they mention. Larger than Javelin, yeah. I saw Synthwave in my concierge chat and was like, leave mysteriously. Someone asked him if we can rent the Idris. The Hopium is maxed. Well, what do you think is going to be the best 6 system for them to add after 1.0? The easiest one would be Odin, because Odin is actually connected to the Nyx system. Magnus would be an easy one to do, and I think CIG would want to do Magnus because Magnus is the home world of Drake, the home system of Drake, and CIG seems to like that sort of connection, and it's connected to Stanton. So there's a Stanton to Magnus connection. There's another easy one would be Hadrian, which is connected to Terra. And the thing about Hadrian is that there are no terrestrial planets. There might be moons that they add, but the idea is that there's no livable, landable areas. The main landing zone of of Hadrian is called Keltu Reef, which I mentioned in the Banu lore video. It's basically a human version of a Banu flotilla made out of different stations, because Hadrian was literally the wall of humanity. It was the do not cross barrier that humanity had built between the humans, between Xi'an and humanity. It was one of the major spots. Because there was no like landing zone, they just built an absolute shit ton of defense stations. And there's just hundreds of them. And half of them have been abandoned because the Cold War is over. So there's just dozens, if not hundreds of stations that dot all over the system, which are easy stations to add for like conflict zones. But basically what Keltu Reef did is it took a bunch of those stations and then just went smush and then created a landing zone based off of all of these different stations. So I don't see them adding landing zone for that because it's just ice giants and gas giants. And it's a unique aspect of it that I don't think they'll change that much because it's cool. So. Does the military service not grant citizenship? It doesn't grant military citizenship. It doesn't grant citizenship. It allows you to apply for citizenship. Service does not guarantee citizenship. Just because you serve doesn't mean you get citizen. You have to go before a citizen review panel, and they will decide if your service was exemplary, because you can only become a citizen for great service to the empire. And if they don't believe your service is great enough, they can deny you citizenship. Which is one of the reasons why the Tavaran don't have a ton of citizens, despite having an overwhelming number of people in the military. Like, basically, if you're a Tavaran in the UEE, you're one of two camps. You're either a criminal or you're in the military. And most of the people who are in the military basically were criminals who got caught and got told you either go into the military or go to jail, and they chose the military. But if you're effectively a press-ganged military, you're probably not going to be super helpful. And so a lot of Tavaran do their service and get out and don't get citizenship. What's the difference between citizenship and non-citizenship? Mostly it's what you access to services. Non-citizens cannot vote in UEE elections. Non-citizens can vote in local planetary elections. They can elect their governor, which is their sort of the head of their nation. So some planets have multiple nations, and each nation has a governor, and the board of governors is the governor's council is sort of a group of people who control the entirety of the planet. So like, you have individual governors who are the leaders of specific nations on a planet, and then those governors would then work with the council to decide the fate of the entirety of the system. There may be like a head governor who's elected as the leader of that planet, but so you can still do that. And you have all the rights of a citizen because you have basic human rights. There's a basic Declaration of Human Rights that the UE has. However, it's harder to get travel permits. So it's harder to leave a system. It's harder to found corporations, especially if it's multi-system corporations. You have access to services that citizens have access to services that non-citizens don't have. You can think of it as like, if you are a citizen and you have to travel through a jump point, you will get priority access over non-citizens. So you can just be swept aside and be moved forward. and a citizen can move forward if you're not a citizen. If you have to go deal with like paperwork, logistics, you might get discounts for being a citizen, for being for like fees and stuff like that kind of thing. Do you think that the remaining Tavaran resent humans for knocking off the making knockoff Tavaran ships? No, actually. There's a huge like divide between the Tavaran. Basically, half the Tavaran are sort of like trying to reclaim the old Tavaran ways away from humanity, and the other half are basically like, we need to integrate into human society and become one with human society. And so the Tavaran ships that we have from Asperia were built with Tavaran actual Tavaran ships that we were able to discover on the planet of I forget the name of it. It's like Cartel or something like that. I can't remember the name of it. But we found an abandoned Tavaran colony. And so we took a bunch of these ships and then we like reverse engineered them. But Asperia hired Tavaran engineers to do it. So like the Tavaran Talon and Prowler are designed and made by existing Tavaran using old Tavaran technology that is then updated to modern specs. So, Cobalt, thank you, Cobalt, or Cabal. Cabal is what it's called. I forgot it was like it's like Cabal. I knew it was like something like a cartel or something like that. It was a similar name to that. It was Cabal. Is it CABAL? So citizenship is like a TSA pre-check, kind of. There's just small perks. The big one is the election. Being able to elect the imperator, senators. So like each planet that is representation in the UEE has a senator, but only citizens can elect senators. Only citizens can elect the imperator. You can only run for office as a senator or imperator if you're a citizen. And I think you can only own land in the UEE if you're a citizen, unless you're a native resident of the planet of the system. You can only own land outside of your home planet if you're a citizen. So if you want to buy like land in Stanton, you have to be a citizen. Watching your walkthrough of the Idris. When I was watching, earlier. Like Starship Troopers, sort of, but like service guarantees citizenship in Starship Troopers. It doesn't guarantee citizenship in the Star Citizen universe. It's actually worse than Starship Troopers. Do we have a Tatiana situation with the Mezzers? Are they still alive? There is one that we know of. Fiona Mezzer. She was the sister of Linton Mezzer, and she disappeared during the anti-Mezzer revolution, and we don't know what happened to her. She could be in hiding. She could have been in cryogenic stasis. She could be dead because, I mean, that was 2970 or 2792, which it's currently 2455. So, over 160 years. And she was already in her 30s when the anti-Mezzer revolution happened, which means she would be 190, which is a little old for humans, even with extended lifespans of humanity in the Star Citizen universe. But cryogenic stasis does exist and has existed for hundreds of thousands of years, or almost 1,000 years in human history. So she could have put herself into cryogenic stasis and been protected by a group. My theory is that the Xeno threat are Mezzerites. That they're like the last surviving, they're a mercenary group, but their main focus is to protect Fiona. And she's still in cryogenic stasis. So they have her in cryogenic stasis somewhere, and they're trying to make a move to basically overthrow the UEE and reinstate Fiona as the imperator. Are there still pro-Mezzers in the modern era? Yeah. I mean, the thing that is important to understand is that a lot of I've heard this discussion. It's like, why if the imperators are so evil, did the UEE keep its name? And the answer is that people didn't like the Mezzers, but they liked the UEE. They liked the idea of the UEE. So really what the revolution wasn't really a revolution as much as it was a change in management. It was a reform that was very violent, which is the reason why NICS still exists. The PLA doesn't like the UEE. They think that the UEE is the same as they were under the Mezzers. They just pretend they're not imperialists. And if you look at it, it's pretty much the same thing. It's light reform. All of the major reforms that were attempted after the fall of the Mezzers failed because the people who were anti-Mezzer but were pro-Mezzer before the anti-Mezzer revolution and just switched sides because they didn't like the Mezzers, they're still pro-Mezzers. They're still basically everything they were in the Mezzers. We call them the centralists. They're effectively the same thing as the Mezzerites. But they just didn't like having a single dictator in charge of everything. They wanted to have the Senate to have more power. So they just reverted it back to just more senatorial power and like more limited power for the imperator. They still liked the structure. And effectively, the only people who are trying to change the structure as a whole are called the transitionalists, and they're the smallest party in the UEE. Those are the people who want to move the capital to Terra. How dare you put your boot on my neck? It should be my boot on your neck. Yeah. Who's the current imperator and how bad is she? Leilani Addison, and she's a third-party candidate. She was a professor, university professor, an engineer, and computer science engineer. She was pretty well beloved. She's very pro-science and very pro-education. Her probably most controversial opinion is that she wants to restart artificial intelligence programs. The other thing you have to understand about AI in the Star Citizen universe is that it's accidentally genocidal. Every single time we build a artificial intelligence, a general AI, Gen AI exists, general intelligence AI, it fucks up and kills people into the tunes of hundreds of thousands of people. So it's been banned in the UEE for hundreds of years and it's been attempted secretly many times and it's nearly started wars. So, when is the Van Duel going to be introduced to the PU? After Nix. They already said that. Isn't she a centralist? No, she's independent. She's not part of any party, which is part of the reason why she hasn't gotten anything done, really. You say accidentally, but like the general AI doesn't take a look at their dumbasses and think, shoot, we need many fewer humans. Well, excuse the fuck out of me for having to convince a 3-year-old to sleep. What? No, I was saying that like we've talked about this before. It's Nix. Sage said it before. So they need servitors, sort of. Effectively, it's Star Citizens. It's CIG writers' way of explaining why we fly ships at World War II speeds. Why the universe is so sort of advanced and not advanced at the same time. Because like in a sufficiently advanced universe with artificial intelligence, there is no way we wouldn't use AI, general AI, to pilot ships in sort of like drone ships around, and using Gen AI as like manufacturing and hazardous materials. Warfare itself would be changed with general AI because we wouldn't have to risk human lives as much. So we could become more brutal, a lot of things like that. So it would be able to speed up because a general AI, general artificial intelligence pilot wouldn't need to sleep or eat or shit. So they could just constantly be going. And the only thing that would be required is downtime for maintenance of their vessel, which is minimal compared to a human. So as a result, our logistics networks are entirely driven by fleshy humans. who need all those things, which slows down the logistics network, which means that anything that needs to be built is going to take a lot longer to build than otherwise. And on top of that, we had a dictatorship which was really stupid and doing really dumb things with technology and kind of sent technology backwards in many ways because their focus was solely on military technology, but not on like cutting edge military technology. Like Project Vespa is a good example of this. Project Vespa was an attempt to turn terraforming lasers into weapons of mass destruction, and it failed spectacularly because you can't really transport terraforming platforms effectively for combat. And while big laser go boom, big laser hard to aim and requires a lot of power. So it's like not as important. So effectively, one of the major reasons why we have World War II combat in space, in terms of the narrative explanation, is that AI technologies haven't advanced much beyond what we have right now in our time, because that's about the limit. We have expert systems. They're really good expert systems, probably more advanced than we have today, but like nothing even close to an independent thinking machine is allowed to exist. As it turns out, flesh is less G-force resistant than ships with computer parts. Exactly. So that's one thing I don't totally understand is why the Mezzers treated the Vanduul as an annoyance. Wouldn't a fascist regime use it to use that to further consolidate power and go military nuts? They sort of did, but you underestimate the realities of the insanity of the Mezzers. Ivar and his son's daughter were relatively sane. But when you get to the fourth generation of Mezzers, it's all about consolidation of power and absolute excess of wealth and privilege. By the time you're dealing with the Vanduul arriving on the scene, there's actually legitimately a Mezzer civil war, which is going on between two different Mezzers. And the one who was in charge was a child. He was 13. And he thought it was a good idea to basically use the Vanduul as a example of why the people needed the Mezzers, because without the Mezzers, the Vanduul would overrun everyone. But the Vanduul were overrunning everybody at the time because they weren't thinking. They were just like, oh, well, we'll stop them eventually. And so we just lost Orion, which wasn't a big deal. But you know, if you don't listen to us, then this is going to happen, because in the Mezzer's mind, the reason why it fell was because the Bengal carrier, or not the Bengal carrier, it was the main fleet carrier that was the anchor of the defense fleet of Orion, left to go deal with insurgents in another system. And that's when the Vanduul attacked and destroyed Orion. So to the young Mezzer, he's like, well, if you didn't fucking act up, we wouldn't have had to pull out that carrier. So it's your fault. This is all your fault, not my fault. You fucked around and now we lost it. It's all your fault. So you have to listen to me and don't cause any more actions. Don't go rebel, because if you go rebel, then I'm going to have to pull more forces away from the Vanduul front and you're going to lose. So yeah, listen to me. That didn't go over well, because he also wanted to erase all of records of that Orion even existed. Isn't it a theory that the early Mezzers knew the Vanduul would be coming? No, there's no indication they knew. But the Vanduul had been a threat for 100 years before they actually invaded and destroyed Orion. Basically, the later Mezzers were the worst dictators, or the worst of the Roman emperors. Like, basically, the Vanduul invaded Orion when the UEE's version of Nero was in power. So like, yeah, just bad timing on or great timing on the Vanduul part, bad timing for the Mezzer part. And the Vanduul threat are not a unified threat. No, yeah, they're not. They're broken up into their own clans and tribes and such. They fight amongst each other, but they unify against a common foe when they think that that foe is worthy of fighting. Is Terra wanting to bring back the Mezzers in power and wipe out all the remaining or wipe out all the remaining oppressors? The transitionalists who are headquartered in Terra, the Terra faction wants to eliminate all of the Mezzers. Like their main focus as a party, the transitionalists, is to root out Mezzer loyalists and destroy them. They want to fundamentally remove any trace of Mezzer regime from the UEE. That's why they want to change the name from the UEE to the Democratic Stellar Union and headquarter it in Terra. Eliminating the citizenship system altogether, too. Honestly, the timing of Vanduul attacks, it suggests intel. Yes, 100%. The Vanduul are not mindless monsters. They know what they're doing. And they've been attacking groups like the Xi'an and the Banu for hundreds of years before humanity encountered them. So humanity, they definitely have been figuring out what humanity is doing. They're smart. They're not stupid. They're a pretty smart race. And it's just a matter of the leaders. Individual leaders are better than others. Wait, what if the Vanduul being pushed out of their space? That is, David, that is one of the theories. One of the theories is that the Vanduul aren't necessarily invading human space, but being pushed out of their own space because they're based off of the Vandals, hence the name, Vanduul, of, the late Roman Empire. Because the UEE is the Roman Empire in space. That was its original context in terms of the story was, what if we had the fall of the Roman Empire, but in space? That's why I can tell you right now that the UEE will fall. The UEE will be split between the Eastern and Western empires with two different imperators running them. How that happens, the Vanduul will attack Earth. They may even sack Earth. Then it'll be up to the players to determine how that'll happen and what's the severity of that. Yeah, the fall of the Roman Empire is the underlying structure of the story. It's the starting blueprint that they worked with, but it's been evolving since then. Are there any indications that the Vanduul pay attention to the political happenings of the UEE? Kinda, yeah. Smart Vanduul warlords will. Like the smart Vanduul war chiefs seem to know what's going on. Slow your roll, though, people. That's like 30 years of dead time from now. Yeah, it's going to be a while. That is a significant amount of time in the future. To be fair, there aren't that many UEE systems. There's only about 30 or so. And we're getting 3 of them with 1.0. So depending on how fast they can roll out systems and how unified their sort of new faction system will be, we'll probably see a couple of systems come out. And I'm fairly certain that CIG is going to emphasize kind of a balance of UEE to non-UEE systems, but probably not alien systems. If CIG gets good at it, and this is a big if because we haven't seen it yet, with all the new systems that they're developing, I could see them producing a new system every 3 months, possibly even multiple systems. But it really depends on their tools and their structure and what 1.0 post 1.0 looks like. Subscription system would destroy the system, would destroy Star Citizen. I know so many people say that it's there, but that's not a discussion for this lore topic. So we'll have that discussion on Thursday if you want to. Well, Wednesday, I think, because Thursday I'm going to be on. Just know that on Wednesday I'm going to be doing the office hours rather than on Thursday, because Thursday Space Tomato wants me to help him out with another Citizen Central thing, so it'll be complicated. I'm still going to stream on Thursday, but we'll see. It probably won't be enough to be a office hours. So, all right, y'all. I'm going to call it there because it's almost 2 hours, 30 minutes. I'm a little bit 30 minutes over. Thank you for watching. Thank you for hanging out. If you did enjoy this, make sure to hit that follow button on Twitch, twitch.tv/theastropub. If you haven't already, watch the Banu video and my video on the fighters and bombers of the UE Navy. This kind of Squad 42 video, lore video. Make sure you check those out. There will be a video on the Idris coming out soon. After this, I'm going to go finish up writing my Idris script, possibly maybe a little bit later because I'm a little tired. And then we'll be doing a complete video on the Regen Crisis, what Regen is and what Regen Crisis is. It'll probably be about 30 minutes long. That'll come out after Invictus, probably in June. And then I'm also going to be doing one on the squadrons of the UE Navy, the miscellaneous ships of the UE Navy. What else? Oh, I'm going to do one on the economy of the Star Citizen universe. So, like, how does the system function? That kind of thing. It's going to be a bigger one. But thank you for hanging out. Thank you for watching. And like I say every time, wait, I got to do this right. Like I say every time, remember, ex Historia ad Astra.